Knox Makers for Show and Share. I'm all excited about this one. There's a lot here to share, and we're going to kick it off with Thea and a bonnet.
So a couple of decades ago, I decided I wanted to try these smocked dresses and stuff. And unlike normal, I did actually start smaller than the main project. So the first thing I made was a bonnet, and then I got sidetracked by like 6 other projects and never came back to it. So when Sue and I were organizing the fabric, this little dotted fabric, and I thought, well, that's perfect. For those of you that don't know what smocking is, it's a way of embroidering on pleats to gather the fabric. It can be purely decorative, or you can use it to shape the neckline or the cuffs of a dress. So in this pattern, after you apply your lace, you put your pleats in here and it gathers it in to give the ruffled look. So I'm going to pass that around.
Did you put it under the thing for a second?
So you can see the pleats and then the stitching. I started off with red and then widen back out a little bit. So yeah. I started off with red, but then I thought I was losing it in the dots, so for the last row I switched to a pink, and that got even worse. But they were supposed to be, little hearts to go in the red. But you'll see that closer up when I pass it around. Anybody interested in learning this, we do actually have a smocking class on the calendar for the 13th, and there are still 3 tickets available. So,
What kind of tool do you use? Needle or hook?
to do the embroidery or to do the pleating, because it's 2 processes. To pleat it, you can either use a fancy machine called a pleater, or you can do it by hand with a long sewing needle. A milliner's needle works really good, and you just pick up your pleats. The embroidery is just like any other embroidery. I used an embroidery needle and 3 strands of DMC floss. So all of your colors are available.
What would you use it for if you were to gather?
People make like rectangular blocks of it, and you can use it as a pillow cover. I mean, you can make anything out of it. For the class, what we're actually going to make are little heart-shaped sachets that you can either just stuff out of cotton batting, or you can actually add potpourri and make a scent sachet. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Thea. I do want to bring up that this is a time where we can share things that were successful, as well as commiserate about our failures and maybe laugh at them. But in the process, you show other people how not to do it, and failing is a part of the making process. I don't know which way Randy's going to talk about his board better work, but a board anyway. But we'll find out.
It actually says this beeping board better work. In the middle to late 1980s, General Atomics built a computer-based control system for their Trigga nuclear reactors. In the 1990s, that was upgraded to QNX. And then around 2004, they hired me to upgrade it to use Windows and Linux. One thing that was constant through those 3 versions and all the versions that have happened since then is that it used a 100 millisecond loop through there in order to, at the beginning of the 100 milliseconds, it'd read all the inputs, do the calculations, write all the outputs to control the reactor. and then to wait for another 100 milliseconds. So everything happened on a 10 hertz cycle. Recently, that is right before the pandemic, I took a contract at the University of Texas to upgrade their QNX console to the new system. And they said, well, why is it 100 milliseconds? To which I gave the very famous response, because that's the way we've always done it. Now, when you're messing with a nuclear reactor, changing things is bad. And I warned them right up front, you know, if we change that to 25 milliseconds, that's going to break a lot of things that assume this loop takes 1/10 of a second to execute. And so I made the appropriate changes to make them happy, and surprisingly, it mostly worked. The one thing that didn't work, surprisingly, was beeping. Whenever there's a message that's flashed up for the operator to be notified, the Windows side of the machine beeps for a 1/4 of a second or so. And when I switched everything to 25 milliseconds, sometimes it didn't beep at all. Sometimes it kind of did a 1/10 of a second beep and shut down real quick. Sometimes it beeped properly. And that was not appropriate, so I decided, well, I got lots of spare relays on the hardware. I'll just connect one of them to a buzzer and have that notify the operator. And then I realized I have 2 versions of this hardware. One that is going into the actual reactor itself, which is where I have all the spare relays. And then there's another unit we use for testing that doesn't have that hardware. So I needed something on that one for testing purposes so we could hear the beep. So I said, well, I'm just going to build a little board that I send a character to over the USB, and when it receives a character, it'll turn on a buzzer for a 1/4 of a second, turn it off for a 1/4 of a second, and that'll be fine. So the first thing I did was my go-to processor for all kinds of projects on the Arduino side anyway is our Teensy's. It used to be Teensy 3.2, which is my favorite processor, but they can't get the CPU anymore, so now I use a Teensy 4.1. But that's $30, which seems kind of excessive for turning a speaker on and off. So I have this drawer full of parts that I've gotten over the years. You know, Adafruit would send me a couple MPUs if I spent over $100. Several things I bought and stuff like that. So I said, this is exactly what that drawer is sitting there for. So I pulled out an Adafruit, I think it was a Feather 32U4 or something like that, and programmed it. I wired up the little transistor in the speaker and programmed it to beep the thing. And when I tried to program it using the latest version of the Arduino IDE, I discovered, oh, they don't support that board anymore. And then I looked through my drawer of little processors like that and discovered, gee, I'm going to find all kinds of problems with all these guys. And quite frankly, I don't want to deal with this. I'd rather pay $30 and stuff like that. Now, once again, beeping a speaker is not something that's justified putting a $30 MPU on there for. But I do have a drawer full of Picos. So I built this little prototype with it's got a Pico H on it, so it's got a $5 board, and wrote a little program for it. And lo and behold, I sent a character over to the USB port, which looks like a serial port to the PC, and it turns on that little buzzer there for a 1/4 of a second and turns it off. And that worked great. And when the computer sent like a couple of beep signals to the machine real quick, I'd hear beep, beep, and that was great. And then when the reactor software started up and there were about 30 of these beep signals sent along, I got to sit there for about 15 seconds listening to it beep for a long time. And also, because it held up the computer while it was doing all this beeping, it also messed up the 25 millisecond loop that I was executing that and kind of messed up things there. So I modified the firmware once again, and this time instead of just turning the thing on for a 1/4 of a second and turning it off for a 1/2 second, it still did that. But in that 1/4 of a second on and off, I also ate any other characters coming along, so you'd only get one beep if the thing came on and off. So this is a little wire wrap prototype, and I guarantee you that the NRC would not be happy to see wire wrap stuff stuck on a reactor these days. So I'll be making a little PC board for that a little bit later. However, one of the main reasons I brought all this here tonight is I have this little drawer full of CPUs that, quite honestly, I'm not ever going to mess with again. And I'm just going to leave them over in the electronic. And there's some good, I mean, there's like an Arduino Nano in here and a Lily Pad and all kinds of little guys like that. Some of them, like the trinkets, are definitely obsolete. If you want to use them, you're going to have to get yourself an Atmel programmer or build one to use them. But that's for someone with more time than I've got to figure that kind of stuff out. Okay, so that's the beeping board, and it does work. So.
Will the reactor still work? Is that board installed?
Well, this one here, yeah, it would work. It would work fine. This, like I said, I've gotten this guy tested, and it does not hang up the software anymore. So,
Does the NRC get involved in any of that? When you're messing with a reactor, or just some mini watt reactor for research?
right. Yeah, so the reactors that I work on, like the one at Texas, is a research reactor, so 1 megawatt. And by the way, megawatt doesn't mean it produces a megawatt of electricity. It just means it produces that much heat. You can convert megawatts and calories, and that's how much heat it produces. Most research reactors, the heat is waste. It just goes out to the heat exchanger, out into the air. What they really produce with research reactors is neutrons, which they use for radiography, creating isotopes, and all kinds of stuff like that.
So the NRC doesn't want to see drawings and everything?
Oh, yes, they do. Now, it's an interesting question because back in the 80s, when General Atomics first created this console, the folks at the NRC knew nothing about software, so they just accepted anything. By 2004, there's this saying in the nuclear industry called like for like. If you replace a piece of equipment with something just like it, even though it's different and updated, the NRC at that time tended to look the other way. So we were replacing an old PC running QNX with a new PC or pair of PCs running Linux and Windows with completely new software. And at that time, they didn't know any better and they let that get away. Now, oh no, they wouldn't let that slide at all. Now you've got to provide IEEE documentation, IEEE standard documentation for software development and hardware development for all that stuff. And you need to be able to prove, here's our set of requirements, here's our set of tests taken from those requirements, we ran the tests and everything passed. They're a lot more stringent today. And although technically there's no reason they shouldn't accept something like this, the bottom line is that if it's not on a PCB, that makes them question whether the thing has gone through a stringent quality assurance program or not. Any other questions? Okay, like I say, the beeping thing does work. I'll leave these over in the electronics section for people who want.
Apparently, Billy doesn't want me to be heard. I can just shout louder. Oh. Okay. Thank you, Randy. I'm sure there'll be quite a few that are excited to go see what treasures are in the baggie. Next up, I have Andrew with a picture thingy.
All right, I don't know exactly how to stand this up. Oh, good catch. But yeah, this is my Raspberry Pi device thingy. I have a lot of analog photos at the house, and I've decided to round them up and try and take or make digital copies of these. And my buddy of mine, he said, "Why don't you just take your camera out and just start taking pictures of it? You know, there's an app for it and everything like that." I'm like, no. I have to complicate my life. So I decided to make a Raspberry Pi picture thingy. And so the idea here is to just be able to slide a picture under there, take a picture, and do another one. And so this provides a little bit more consistency in the taking of the pictures in the long term. Because I mean, holding up a camera like this, you're going to be all over the place, all that jazz. Initially, I had the idea to make a distance sensor. So every time you wave your hand over it, it took a picture. But the software, the supporting software for it, just didn't work. I'm like, okay. Let me just try a web interface for this. And so I don't know if I'll be able to show this or not. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. And then this is kind of like a picture of a picture. So this is a simple UI that I created. Just capture an image. If I mess up an image, I can just go override it. So it doesn't really waste space or anything else like that. And I'm able to actually preview the images in the same web interface. So the last image that was taken, I actually see it, so I can actually redo it if I need to. I do envision taking this a little bit further and doing auto cropping eventually. But right now, I just figure what I'll do is just I'll just take the pictures and get the regular process going, and then I'll do the cropping and then the artificial intelligence post-processing later. So that's what I kind of figure for, this is just the initial step. And so, yeah, any questions?
So if you're already going to do some sort of auto cropping, you could do position recognition, where it's looking for some sort of rectangular square.
Yeah.
Then you can put a treadmill on the bottom.
Yeah, see, that's what I was thinking too.
You just automate it.
Oh, yeah.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yep. We're on the same track right there.
I saw recently like a laser cutter that has a treadmill-based belt, and it uses that recognition to burn on. It's just for production or speeding up. That'd be perfect.
Right.
Way to rip through some photos. Not literally.
Yeah.
Rip through some photos.
Right, and I actually found like a vending machine, like little treadmill things. You know, you see those little treadmill things on vending machines. It kind of conveys it to the whole. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah. So yeah, we're tracking.
Keep us posted.
Oh yeah. They're on the Pi for right now. I did think about doing like I've got my own home network. I've got my own lab. I can set up anything I want. So, I mean, yeah, you're all right. I mean, it would be a good idea to do a CDN eventually, but for the time being, keep it simple and move. Keep it simple and move. So, yeah. Anything else? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andrew. There's times I have a little tripod I got to hold the camera, and yeah, it isn't always where I want it, and when it takes the picture. So that's when I bring out the step ladder and try and get it up higher, and then you get the step ladder in it, and yeah, then I get my toes in it. Yeah, and that's on a good day. So next up we have Josh with the maple burl.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to change the maple burl to maple burl thing now, or thingy. Not sure if we're going to be able to get it all a decent amount. Okay. So this is a lovely piece of maple burl. There is a bit of spalting that you can see. There's a bit of curl. Overall, it is a gorgeous piece of wood. This is the actual burl itself. This is going to be the top. This will eventually be some sort of bowl. So we'll be able to highlight as much of the burl as possible. Past this burl, you get into more of the actual log, the branch that it grew off on. Oh, am I anywhere on? There we go. Anyways, So this is less entertaining than, hopefully, than what this will be. But there's some really, really nice wood hiding in there, and some really beautiful spalting. A new friend of mine, Pat, was able to track this down and actually drop this off to me in front of my house, which is great. It's like the best Amazon delivery ever. But there is, I don't know if you guys can see, there's some movement, and there's not just some movement. If you can see here as well too, there's a significant amount of bug damage. I actually watched an ant pull a grub out today, so that was something. But this whole piece will end up flying away, a whole new UFO club. This piece is actively leaving. So I spoke with Neil about it, and Neil was kind enough to offer some suggestions. We actually chopped this up to a stage just before this at as the lathe turns, our monthly, I'm not sure how often we'll do that, turning social. So we got to poke and prod and talk shop and see what we're gonna do with it. But Neil was kind enough to not just offer some advice on what to do on how to stabilize these pieces, but actually bring some wood for it. So this is a lovely piece of cocobolo, which is a very poisonous wood if you don't really take good care of it, of yourself. You don't have to take care of the wood, take care of yourself. But this will be flattened and a recess or mortise put in for it to accept a tenon here. So there's some good mechanical stability, and this will end up being the base. Bearing wood. Cocobolo is extremely dense wood, and I am extremely weak now. But this is how it'll eventually start to look. So get a good look at it. This is stage 1, stage 0. Hopefully I can start filling you guys in on, everyone in, on how this starts to take shape, pun intended. Any questions? Yes?
Were you going to use resin to fill the gaps and stabilize it more?
So that's a great question. That would be the easiest, but and I've been humming and hawing on not using resin. I was really keen on trying to save, not just save, but trying to keep these holes completely passed through. I think vessels with holes that go completely through are very cool. I've never done something like that, and I was really excited to try it. Realistically, there's just no chance. I would have to get this turned to get a tenon on it, to get the base. This will kill me and or somebody. So yes, we're gonna go with resin, and I think because of the high spalting character of this wood, we're gonna go with the black resin. So it'll be all in this bark included cavity because this guy's gonna go all in this bark included cavity because this bit of wood's the only thing hanging on to that shaky bit. And that's actually part of the same cavity. Focus you. And then same over here. So yeah, we'll stabilize it quite a bit, despite my humming and hawing. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you.
At that, it's beautiful wood. It is beautiful wood. Quite artistic, as I suppose the drawing will be that Matt is going to show us. Where are you, Matt? All right.
May have left a bit of dust up there, sorry, Matt.
That's fine, man.
As long as there's no ants.
I can't promise it.
So I made a drawing. I also made the panel here, for what that's worth. But it's my first crack at doing any sort of color on like a gesso panel. It's the second gesso panel drawing that I've done, and I like it. I'm going to make more. But it's colored pencil and a little bit of, there's a bunch of everything. There's some ink in there. There's some oil pastel in there. There's some Conti crayon in there and some chalk. And it's mostly colored pencil on top of it. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, there's the glass. Oh, well, maybe I can bag it out. Color's kind of washed out, but that's okay. Let's see if we can get closer. Wow. Yeah. That's sort of it.
How did you smear the pencil?
Mostly using my finger, and I had some paper, some paper smudges. There's a ton of kneaded eraser on it too, with just kind of like a light touch.
How long did it take?
Probably like, I don't know, actual drawing time, maybe like 15 hours, maybe. I did a sketch that really helped me out that I probably spent about 3 hours on, just in my sketchbook, that made the whole thing go way quicker than I actually did it.
For those of us who are not visual artists at all,
Yeah.
I've heard of gesso,
Yeah.
no idea what it is.
Oh, it's awesome. It's just a really, really hard, really perfectly white medium. It fills wood grain, it primes canvas, it does everything. Yeah.
Were you going to make 3 more for each of the seasons?
I'm gonna make a few more. I don't know. I know that the next one up is gonna be a sunflower, but I like I like drawing some organic stuff sometimes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Matt. It's quite artistic. Better than I can do, that's for sure. So next up, we have color still, but color whirls. Bob?
Almost 30 years ago, I was at somebody's house, and they had 3 steel discs, 1/4-inch steel, much like this, and they're supposed to oscillate. And she said, "We paid a lot of money for this thing. It ran for 45 minutes in the artist's studio. It won't even run 10 now." I said, "Let me look at it." I leveled it up, cleared the spaces, and got everything going, and that sucker ran for 45 minutes. Okay. That was almost 30 years ago. I've kept this project in mind, not knowing how I was ever going to do it or whatever. Okay, I got here, and guess what? They've got a laser cutter. I could cut really perfect circles. So I did. And I made it in cardboard, and I stuck a steel pin through it, and it was kind of cool, but it was wobbly, and I set the thing aside. Well, the other day, I was cleaning out the garage and moving stuff around. I was moving stuff around, and I came across the cardboards. And I said, every project I do now, I print something that's a part of it. And I could print some bearings for this with a flat circle so that everything would be perpendicular and line up. So I did. 2.5 millimeters, I took a welding rod, ran it through there, and it works. Well, then I thought, my projects have always been kind of half done. I got it working. So I built a rough wood stand, and I said, what would happen if I painted the stand, And then I painted the cardboards and made this an almost finished project. Because my plan, Joe, is to use the plasma cutter and cut these and actually do one in steel. So I got the whole thing assembled, and I said, you know, this is good enough to take to the makers. There's no motorized things on this. They're almost perfectly balanced. Each of these has a specific period. And in the original in steel, they would start off together, then they would separate, and then they would come back together and separate. It was really, really cool. And that was what I wanted to do. And so with this guy is kind of stuck. But anyway, you see the idea of it. I just think it's a really cool effect. Questions? Yeah.
That is painted cardboard, right?
I'm sorry.
That's painted cardboard, right? The circles?
Hang on, just let me try this. I have trouble hearing.
Yeah. So the large shapes are just painted cardboard, correct?
They're all painted cardboard. And the red one came out of this hole, and the blue one came out of this hole, and the other hole I just made to off-balance it. So I cut all three of them at once on the laser cutter so that they were all the way I wanted them. Any other questions? Yeah.
So when you decide to make it out of steel, will it be that size or can you make it bigger?
It's actually going to be a little bit smaller because that was the piece of steel I had. So I'll go maximum on the piece of steel and then cut the 3 circles out of that. The other thing is on the steel, it'll be easier to lead the plasma cutter into the thing rather than trying, at least on the initial one, rather than trying to pierce it, I'm guessing. I don't know. But it's kind of interesting to try to find the center of gravity of something that has a big hole in it. And it's really important that you know exactly where that center of gravity is. So what I did is I took and cut and made a triangle, long, skinny triangle, and then set the thing on there and worked and moved it until it balanced. Then I noted the path of the, where the ridge on the triangle was, and then I moved it 30, 40 degrees and did the same thing. And I had to fill in the hole with some paper. And then I did that about 3 times, and the intersection of all of those points was the center of gravity. And then I built a cardboard piece to kind of project into that, and then drilled the hole. So, it really looks weird to see one of these things just looping around like that. It looks like it should be lumpy. It should be going, but you can see how smooth it is. Anything else? Thank you.
I don't know about everybody else, but that was kind of hypnotizing. Yeah. So no hypnotism in this, though. We are an all-volunteer organization. And so if I could get a volunteer to change the jet air filters over in the wood shop, that would be great. No experience needed. We'll find you somebody who knows how to change them to help you with that. Just volunteer. All right, got it. I think the ones in Bay 2 also need to change the air filters. So perhaps you can do both. Next up, we have some new folks I noticed in the audience. And so if you have questions afterwards, see somebody with the red badge for your questions and or tour. But feel free to talk to anybody and everybody about what they're doing and why and Why do they like the shop? So coming up, one thing that a lot of people will be looking forward to is the market. Yeah! So we're going to have a night market, October 12th. And as if you couldn't hear, Aliki has once again volunteered to help organize that. And I think we should probably have the market channel is there for anybody who wants to volunteer or get involved. Yes. So go ahead and do that. Yes. Evening. We're thinking maybe 5 o'clock, but we're not sure. Oh, 4. Okay,
It's on the board out back too.
It's
October
4.
12th, Saturday, October 12th.
Saturday, October, yeah, 4 to 9. That way we can keep it mostly daylight. There'll be a little bit of duskish in there, dark, for the spookier vendors, if you will, or whoever we may attract. We're also thinking about doing another kill switch, so stay tuned. Oh, we have some challenges going on in the audience here. Only if he leaves it outstanding, right? Leaves it out. Little inside humor there. So, on to more serious things. We talked in our annual meeting about starting a scholarship program for kids who don't have opportunities like some can and do, but are really artistic. So we started a scholarship program. And I'm really happy to announce that we've managed to collect enough to get 2 candidates. So you might be seeing a couple of younger ones in soon, I hope. And then the next thing I want to talk about, one thing that's always on my mind, is food. Who doesn't like a good barbecue, right? How about one on July 23rd? Yeah! Let's have a cookout. And members, you're welcome to bring whatever. So I don't know about you, but I've already been starting to look at things to bring for potluck type stuff. So 3 weeks potluck. In the meantime, we can make stuff. So let's go ahead and go out in the shop and get to making. Thank you all.